former president of Fox Sports, Bob Thompson, joins us to talk about the Mountain West and the Big Ten.
College football is back, and we're back on the Big Mountain with a very special guest.
Hey, great to have you back on the mountain. I am JY. This is my good friend Steve. And Steve, we are fortunate enough to have Bob Thompson join us here. We're going to get to him in just a minute. Want to make sure everybody knows who he is. We're fortunate enough that he's going to be giving us some of his time. We want to talk about the Mountain West, some of the additions that they've had, and maybe where they might be heading. And I know you have some questions about the Big Ten and maybe just more of the national landscape of media rights and where things can be headed. So why don't we just kind of talk about who is Bob Thompson and what has he been doing?
Yeah, so Bob's retired now, former president of Fox Sports, as you mentioned. He does have his Thompson Sports Group consulting firm now, and he's been we've seen him on a bunch of different outlets just talking about the PAC, talking about the Mountain West, talking about media deals. But this is honestly, one of the biggest people in sports media when it comes to college sports over the last couple decades. Before being the president of Fox Sports, he was also the president of Prime Sports Network. And to me, the thing that got me really excited, he was one of the co-founders of the Big Ten Network. So, we talk about that partnership between Fox Sports and the Big Ten, how they created the Big Ten Network, which, created such revenue and kind of revolutionized sports media. And he had a long history in the business. He started by selling cable service door to door at age 23. He helped create all those regional Fox Sports networks that were across the country and moved all the way up to being the president and CEO of Fox Sports and creating the Big Ten Network. So just a massive get. We're so excited to have him on here today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's get right to it. We're going to start with the Mountain West. Bob, welcome to the Big Mountain, and thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us.
My pleasure, guys. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. We're going to get right into some of our questions. I want to start with the Mountain West. That's, them in the PAC is where a lot of the news is right now in the realignment game. Everybody, I think, knows at this point that 5 schools have decided to leave the Mountain West in 2026 to join the Pac-12. That left the Mountain West with 6 full members and 1 football member. We know now the Mountain West obviously added UTEP or is going to be adding UTEP as a full member, and Hawaii becomes a full member as well in 2026. That gets them back to the minimum needed to be an FBS conference of 8 schools. Commissioner Navarez has said in many interviews that I have heard her speak, and we both believe she's one of the best commissioners in the nation. Just really impressed every time I hear her speak. They just had the basketball media days here a couple of weeks ago. I love to hear her speak. Just very forthcoming and just very down to earth. At least that's what she comes across as. But anyway, she has stated many times before that they have been making plans since last year, even when she became commissioner of the conference. So this wasn't really, it was new that people are leaving or schools are leaving the conference, but they had already been planning for targets, maybe invites coming forward. So that had already kind of been, the stage had been set for them. Clearly here, they're being very strategic about their decisions and what invites that they're doing. So would love to hear your thoughts here right now about the additions of both UTEP and Hawaii. What do you think that looks like for their existing media partners? And do you think the existing media partners are playing a role in these decisions in terms of what conferences are doing in additions of schools?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, that had to be a bit of a gut punch to the Mountain West when that all came down. It was a surprise to me. I mean, I kind of always knew there'd be some movement, significant movement one way or the other between the 2 groups. Either the Pac-2 were coming in or a bunch of Mountain West, if not all the Mountain West was going to get together on the other side. I think you're absolutely right. They've been working on this. I had the opportunity to talk to Gloria right in the middle of all this because one of her schools was looking for some information that they thought maybe I could provide. Unfortunately, because of some prior legal work, I can't really be on the other side of anything that Fox does. So I couldn't help them, but I gave her some ideas about the people to call, and apparently she did because they stayed. I think strategically, they've been working with the folks at Endeavor, Joan Brutkin, who used to work for me, and Hillary Mandel, who's been kicking around this business for a long time. They're two of the best as far as figuring out exactly how this next round of realignment should go, and strategically what markets make sense for the TV partners. The TV deal's up here in a couple of years, I believe, with Fox and CBS and CBS Sports Network. So they'd probably be at that point where they're getting ready to go down that road anyway. So now with the new setup, I think the only thing they might be talking to the schools or to the media guys now is if they really are interested in going beyond 8. Maybe they just go to stick at 8 in football and go 10 in basketball. I'm hearing a lot of Grand Canyon rumblings here in my hometown of Phoenix, Scottsdale area. So, and you could say, well, maybe St. Mary's wants out now that Gonzaga is leaving. So, those two might be an interesting poach. As far as the media folks, I'm sure that, they probably, well, not probably, they have a right to first negotiation of some sorts, probably a right of last refusal, right to match, something along those lines, which gives them the pole position going forward. The question becomes, with the defections and the strength of the football level of those defections, is it something they're going to be interested in? Or are they going to look at the Pac-12, who are going to be in basically the same position and pretty much the same timing, would be my guess. So there's going to be a race there. The Pac-12 is involved in the race to 8 internally. They got to find somebody else, and it would be interesting to see. Maybe they go back and talk to some of the other schools that have been thrown around in the past, be it AAC or any of those types of schools, or even some of the Mountain West schools. It's never over till it's over, and as the saying goes, realignment never sleeps, and they are. You got to get everybody locked down, and I'm sure the commissioner has done the best she can at this point, but now they got to come through with the media deal, because I've seen a certain number of guarantees floating around, and she's going to want to pay those guarantees, hopefully out of the media deal and not out of the money she's going to take out of the Pac-12's back pocket, hopefully, when the other guys leave. So that's another thing that's going to be interesting, is how that lawsuit goes down. Historically, commissioners and presidents and athletic directors don't like discovery, and they like depositions and witness stands even less. And so I expect settlement. If you look over the past, and having been involved in some of these deals in the past, they settle for some cents on the dollar. So I don't expect the whole 55 to get paid, but there'll be probably more than half gets paid at least, I would think. That's just off the top of my head, based on what I've seen over the last 25 years in realignment. As far as the ads, I mean, Hawaii was, that to me, that was the layup. I mean, they've been living in sin for years, right? Kind of half married, half not. I think that, I don't know how the travel's going to all work out, but there's some benefits to Hawaii. Everybody knows about the Vegas Chase games, and which is a true thing. I mean, I've been rumbling around Vegas late at night, and there's a bunch of people in there in the sports book still watching the games. On my way to bed, I say, "You guys have a good time." UTEP makes sense, I think, for the schools, the other schools in Texas. I think UTEP's probably a better fit than any of the ones around, Dallas or the Houston area, because those markets, I don't know that they're corner the El Paso market. I don't know that they would have cornered the Houston or Dallas markets if they added one of those schools around there. But there are some intriguing schools there. I think Texas State, Carleton, Sam Houston, all everything that's out there is interesting and is kind of poised. And it's important not just for the time zone, but for recruiting. I mean, to be able to plant your flag in those markets is extremely important. And in a lot of realignment moves, um, the background or the rationale was market size and where the recruiting goes and just having your games exposed in those markets where you hadn't necessarily in the past. As far as the media guys, will Fox stay, will CBS stay? I don't know. I mean, a lot of it depends if they go towards the lean towards the Pac-12 and those new schools. Fox is pretty loaded with picking up having those 4 schools on the West Coast with Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, and then you've seen what they've done. They've kind of created instead of Pac-12 after dark, it's now Big Ten Friday night after dark, and which I kind of expected. Once Fox lost the wrestling, it was pretty clear that they were going to lean towards Friday night sports. Since they already owned it, why go out and buy something else or try and create some scripted drama that probably would end up on Netflix anyway? So, CBS, slightly different scenario. They've picked off some stuff here and there. A lot of the Mountain West stuff in the past was important for CBS Sports Network, and they liked the service matchups and things like that, and so they're going to lose some of that with Air Force going away. But it'll be interesting. You got some other guys floating around. TNT's got a couple $1 billion burning a hole in their pocket from likely not having the NBA. No, you never know until it's over. But they picked up a small package, and the interesting part is the package they're airing is mostly the schools that are left in the Mountain West. If you look at the TNT games.
Yes.
The CW's out there. I think, they like their ACC package, but there's not necessarily a long life on that. It's only got a few years to go. The Pac-12 deal, or the Pac-2 deal, I think was just for a year, maybe with an option or something like that. So they might like to stay. But if it's something they, can't work out on the Pac-12, maybe they go this way as well, because they're looking for stuff to marry with the ACC and marry with their NASCAR racing and create that whole day on Saturday. So, and then there's probably a streamer out there. The question is it going to got to be somebody like an ESPN Plus, or would it, say TNT comes in, would it be on Max? Something like that. CBS, they could offload stuff to Paramount Plus. So that's kind of how I look at it. They've got the head start, the Mountain West does, without a doubt. I think they don't like the idea of going to market with the idea of the TV consultants having to say, would you make an offer for us with these teams, and then a second offer with these teams plus another, or plus 2 more? I would always just kind of say, well, why don't I just pay you this amount for these teams, and anybody else that comes in, you pay for, or something somebody else pays for. I don't think that from a TV side, whatever they're bringing in is probably not as good as what they already have. So my idea of paying a pro rata amount would be off the table. I'm not a pro rata guy. Never liked those, just, if you want to put something to me and I'll take a look at it, fine, but don't expect that you're going to get auto ads without me at least having some say in the matter. Because, you might be adding because you lost somebody who's more valuable than what you're adding. So it cuts both ways. So never a big fan of those, but I know the guys doing the Pac-12, and they're smart guys. They've done deals before. They know what they're doing. It just puts them in a tough spot, not knowing, what the ultimate size of the conference is going to be. You got Gonzaga kind of hanging out there. You still need an eighth football school. Are they going to go to 10? Or what, just what are they going to do? And so it just makes it a little more difficult to deal on the TV side, but not impossible. It's all doable. That's why consultants get paid, so they'll deal with it somehow.
Yeah, so a couple follow-ups, and I appreciate you
Uh-huh.
kind of laying everything out there. So in a perfect world, I would think that from the Mountain West side, they want to know how many members they want to have, whether that's 8 football, 9, 10, whatever it is, and then they want to go to market with that full contingent of membership. You just kind of hit on that. So again, in a perfect world, I guess the timeline would be we're going to probably see the additions happening, the commitments of the additions happening here over the next several months before they take anything to market with the Mountain West. I know the Pac is doing things a little bit differently, but is that what you would say is probably what we're going to see with the Mountain West?
Probably. The only thing is I don't know the particulars of the Mountain West TV deals. I don't know what time, when the trigger dates come as far as exclusive negotiating windows, things like that. Those can, kind of go 12 to sometimes 18 months in advance of the expiration. So they got another year on their deal, I think, or is that right? One more year?
Yes, it goes through 26. Yeah.
It's probably they're probably coming up on it if they've got a 12-month. So there'll be some window, might be 90 days, it might be 120, where they're going to have to talk to Fox and CBS. So if they don't know exactly who they got, they're going to have to go with some either stick with what they got or go with some what ifs. And again, that would not be my pleasure as the seller, nor as the buyer.
Right. Couple follow-ups on additions. I want to maybe dig a little deeper into Hawaii because they are very unique in terms of they get that you mentioned the chase bets out there in Vegas, which is a real thing. And also it just gives you that late time slot that nobody else has. They have kind of owned their home media rights and would have been able to sell them on their own. Spectrum, I believe, Spectrum Sports is our partner this year and has been their partner. Can you maybe expound a little bit on the value of the Hawaii market and just having that extra time zone that you do get that late game and just what that might mean to a conference?
Well, for Hawaii, it's always been kind of the best of both worlds for them. They keep the rights at home, and when they play on the road, it's part of the Mountain West. They've had a deal, it was with Time Warner Cable forever, and we used to sublicense some games from them in the early days of the regional sports network business. Now, Time Warner was bought by Charter, who operates a Spectrum, so they've continued on with the deals, and they like them. I think. Not sure if they're still doing them pay-per-view like they did for a lot of years, but it's great for Hawaii because that's their only team.
Right.
They got really nothing else, and it's a big deal. The Rainbows are a big deal in Hawaii, so I think from that standpoint, and I don't know all the financials, what Spectrum's paying them, and what share of Mountain West money they might have got, but I think for the conference, pulling in that time zone, pulling in that market. You look at a lot of these schools on the West Coast, and there's a ton of kids from Hawaii. I mean, they're putting out a lot of kids. I went to Oregon. We've had five quarterbacks out of there, and including the current one. So, and you look up and down the coast, whether it's the BYU's and the Utahs and the Oregons and all over San Diego, they're always a fair number of Hawaiians. So from a recruiting standpoint, it's great. From an exposure standpoint, it's great because it's a decent sized market, and it does add that extra time zone, which allows you to do a couple things. Number one, you can fit more games in across your broadcast partners. You're not having to double up on a bunch of things or relegate something to streaming. So if you can do a scenario where you've got a couple games on CBS or CBS Sports Network, FS1, FS2. There hasn't been a lot of Mountain West games over on Big Fox unless it was a BYU or not a BYU. Boise State was the one that Fox tends to pick up on if they put it on the big network. So that would allow you to have multiple games delivered nationally across, in reasonable times in each time zone without having to inconvenience a lot of people. You play an early game, you play an afternoon game, you play a night game, you can play a late night game. So you really got 4 good solid windows for the just basically going from Central through Hawaii.
Yeah, that's great. And that goes right into my last question on the Mountain West. And I promise I'm going to let Steve have some time with you and appreciate all your time. But you mentioned kind of fitting games into different windows, and there has been talk that the Mountain West is actually looking to the Central Time Zone and even the Eastern Time Zone with Toledo. So, early news came out that Commissioner Navarez had reached out to the MAC, maybe looking at football only with Northern Illinois and Toledo. You had mentioned some of the Texas schools. We've been banging the Texas drum here for the Mountain West. Pretty much every episode we talk about this. We just think that's a fantastic market, both in terms of everything that you've said and the time zone. I'd love to hear from you maybe a little bit more about what that means to be in potentially here. Let's just crystal ball this and say both Northern Illinois and Toledo say yes to the Mountain West. They would be the only conference in 5 different time zones. Can you maybe talk a little bit more? You mentioned that with Hawaii, but to have a conference in 5 different time zones, one would think that a media partner, again, to fit those games into different windows, that they would love that. Can you speak to that maybe just a bit more?
Sure. It comes with some good things in that you're, like I said, you're spread across you got a lot of windows that you can fill across the different various time zones. You're recruiting in all those time zones. You've got, everybody's got displaced alumni, so you're reaching them that way as well, assuming you get some coverage out in those areas. The thing that's tough is you end up with like what Washington had this week, a 9 a.m. kickoff in Washington for when they play Indiana. Right. And then the flip side is when was it, Friday night after the baseball game? USC Rutgers kicked off about 11:30 at night, I think, in New Jersey. So when you have that many time zones, and it would even be even worse when you had Hawaii, especially if they're playing an East Coast school. Can you imagine a 2:30 a.m. kickoff for Rutgers or something? I think the time zone's that 3 hours. So it cuts both ways. I think it's a harder paradigm if you get to that 4th and 5th time zone, but it does open up more opportunities to get games carried where they're not up against other games, which is kind of what you hope, is that you're not eating, we just call it eating your young, by scheduling 2 games of the same conference up against each other. And because there's conference fans and there's specific team fans, and a lot of people would watch a conference game, if that was the only game, even if their team wasn't in it. And so it's, like I said, it kind of goes both ways, but I can see the advantages for them. I don't know that they need to go east. I think stopping at Central is probably would be my suggestion.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I will stop on the Mountain West, and I am one of those guys. I watch as many Mountain West games as I can. So I am the conference fan. I will watch them, even the midnight Hawaii games. I will stay up and watch as much as I can, being on the East Coast. So Steve, I'll let you have some questions here. I will stop taking all of Bob's time.
Well, Bob, again, just great to have you. And when JY told me you were going to come on our show, as a Big Ten guy, I've been a Big Ten fan all my life. Well, really since Penn State joined the Big Ten back in 1990. When I heard you were going to be on here, I had to ask about the Big Ten Network. Okay. I know that's a little bit in the past, but you helped create the Big Ten Network, which I believe, as a Big Ten fan, completely revolutionized the sports media world and was a major catalyst for almost everything we've seen happen in college football, major college football, major college sports over the last couple decades. So my question for you, step back in time a little bit. Did you know when you guys created this, when you started this, did you think you were just taking a flyer on something, or did you know what you had and what kind of impact and significance it was going to have on the whole sports media world?
Well, let's see, how do I answer that? It was let's call it a calculated flyer. We knew we had something because a lot of that content had been distributed in the Big Ten territory for years as part of syndication packages. So there was a appetite for the content. We'd seen and had talked to other conferences about this for a long time. Um, I was in Denver at the time and was very familiar with the mountain. In fact, I was running a network for Liberty Media out of the same building for a number of years as the mountain. And so I knew kind of what happened there and what didn't happen there. And when we sat down with the conference, once we got everybody to buy in, we thought it was going to be pretty good. We had an advantage in that at the time Fox owned DirecTV, so even though it was a partner, um, those can sometimes be the most difficult negotiations as opposed to dealing with somebody outside your own company, because no everybody wants to show the big boss that the other guy didn't screw them in the deal. So that but we were able to get them on quickly, and we were able to get Dish on quickly. And so once we kind of knew we had those in our pocket, as we put together the network, we had a couple things in mind, and that was, we knew there was going to be a lot of pushback from the cable operators. They told us early on, I got called every name in the papers, from Detroit to Chicago and out to Pennsylvania, and that we were somehow going to ruin college sports, and this was a mess. And what people, I think, failed to understand was a couple of things. We knew the football would be good, but we also knew that the network's going to take most of the football games. We were gonna feast in the first 4 weeks of the season because of all the non-conference games. And so for the conference, rather than have those streamed, to be able to put them on Big Ten Network where we'd have just alternate channels for the extra games was a huge advantage. That way, those games were distributed nationally, just like the games that were on ESPN at the time. So that was important. The other thing that was important was just the tonnage when it comes to men's and women's basketball. We knew we could live off that. But we also felt that hockey was a good opportunity. There was no Big Ten conference hockey at that time. I had a lot of experience with the WCHA and some of the Hockey East and ECHL, some of those leagues through our regional networks. And so we kind of had our eyes on hockey to begin with. And then, there's some stalwarts in the Big Ten, men's wrestling. Baseball was never big because of the weather, but a lot of those schools have come around since then. Volleyball to me has been the biggest surprise. That's done very, very well. So the first year was tough. I mean, we got, we caught lightning in a bottle that first game of Michigan Appalachian State, and I'm sitting at home watching. I go, I can't believe this is happening, and it was absolutely amazing. But the cable guys all stiffed us, and Jim Delaney and myself and Mark Silverman, the guy that we picked to run it. We had some very difficult conversations with some presidents and athletic directors. And in fact, Jim was superb at keeping them all together. And, I was beating on Silverman to make sure that the production was flawless so that they couldn't say, oh, look at this thing. It looks like crap. Nobody wants to watch this. And which is also one of the reasons why we came out of the bat. That was the first network to do 100% of their programming in high def. And that was something that we committed to early on to the conference, because we felt, given where everybody was at in the TV production world, it was time. And we might as well go all in. And we never even thought about, well, let's do the women's soccer games in standard def. We were just like, I told our truck guy, we need all high def trucks. So if you can build a small one, that's great, but it's got to be high def. So that helped. The product looked great, but we had some difficult conversations. We did a little conference tour, Mark and myself, talking with presidents and ADs, and there were some uncomfortable conversations in places like Iowa, Ohio State, Wisconsin. The Michigan folks were pretty good. Tom Izzo was a little skeptical at times, but they all hung in there for us. And literally the week before the second football season, we closed everybody. And we went from, this thing being, this is, a lot of people looking at us the side of their eyes going, what are you guys doing? To all of a sudden it was bam, it was done. We were off and running. And since then it's, there's still, you always have those skirmishes with different distributors, and you're going to get kicked off certain markets and then brought back on. But since then it's been, extremely profitable for not only the conference, but the individual schools. I think, Fox has increased their ownership interest significantly. So that means they bought that equity from the conference, and that was probably distributed to the schools. And the rights deal, I think, has been renewed a couple of times, and that gets distributed to the schools as well. So, Fox wouldn't be doing this if they weren't making something at it. So I'm assuming they're still doing all right. And it looks great. The other conferences, their channels take a slightly different tact, I think. They're different models. Those are more revenue share models as opposed to having actual equity partners in the channel. And I think that is important. And we really like that idea because it felt to us like the conference was, more vested in the success of the network as opposed to just, us just sending them a check.
Yeah.
We had a lot of some of those initial board meetings. We had a lot of interesting conversations about, what kind of advertising. No beer. Okay. Well, in a Buffalo Wild Wings ad, can you have a glass of beer sitting there? And
Right.
that was okay.
Yeah.
But no, no Coors Light. And I think to this day they still don't have that. But it's done great. I think Mark Silverman, who's now running Fox Sports, or as president over there, along with Eric Shanks, who's the CEO. He did a great job those first 10 years, just expanding the thing, and all the programs that we did with the schools and the internships that we have in Chicago. They're still in the same building that I found in Chicago, which is if you guys know, the old Montgomery Ward's building right on the river.
Yep.
And we took this, wasted piece of space, and the guys from Fox did an amazing job building out the studios and things like that. So, it's turned out really great. I'm happy to say that in a couple of weeks I'm going to New York, and Jim Delaney is being inducted into the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame. And coincidentally, Philip Garvin, who was someone who was a longtime business partner of mine and Fox's, is being inducted into the Sports Business Hall of Fame as well. And he's the guy that built all the trucks. So it's interesting that they were so tied. They know each other, but they don't know each other well. But one of the reasons both of them are getting in is because of the Big Ten Network.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah. Well, JY is a huge hockey fan, and I tell him often, if not for the Big Ten Network, there would have never been a Big Ten hockey conference. It was all split
Without
up
a
in
doubt.
these little regional conferences. So, every sport was touched. Volleyball, like you talked about. Women's volleyball, huge draw. Without the Big Ten Network, nobody would be watching women's volleyball.
Yeah, you see Fox puts it on the big network these days. So, and I think it played, in realignment, it played an important part. I don't know that Jim ever really came to us and said, look, I want to add some schools. Where should I go? He said, maybe if I had these schools, would this be good? Because I can tell you, while Nebraska was a good ad from a certain standpoint, from a TV standpoint, it's not a great market. It's, on a football day in Lincoln, that's the biggest, there's more people in the stadium than there's anywhere else in the state. So it's, that clearly wasn't just a TV move. Now I can look at some of the others and say, well, yeah, if you can turn those, what were once outer market BTN territories to intermarket BTN territories and collect a higher license fee from an intermarket rate, that's a good thing. but I think it was also good for the conference to just spread its wings a little bit. And I think as far as the other schools, Oregon, Washington, you know, they kind of just had to do something because they didn't like what was happening out west. And USC and UCLA had already been kind of analyzed by the bigger checks and were already gone. And certainly part of that is the Big Ten network part, because that's what's helped paying the bills over there.
Well, I would say I think you're being a little bit modest there because I think, that group, you and Jim Delaney, I'm sure there's a lot of other people involved. What you guys created, I said revolutionary earlier, and what I really should have said is evolutionary. I think it just brought on a whole new era of college sports, and not just the Big Ten expansion, but if you see the other, Texas with their Longhorn network, and then their decision to stay in the Big 12, not going to the Pac, the SEC with their network, all of the other conferences had to respond because the Big Ten all of a sudden had this juggernaut. I mean, just a
Right.
juggernaut. So I think you're being a little bit modest there.
Wow.
It's amazing what you guys created and what it's done. I think it was evolutionary. But that leads me into my next question. Do you think what do you think that kind of next, whether it's revolutionary or evolutionary step is in sports media and college sports media? We hear so much about streaming. Everybody talks about streaming, but the caveat to that is what we've seen is the over the air games on the big network on Fox and ABC have been getting the big ratings, making the big money. So do you see, are we on the precipice of changing to an era of streaming for sports media, or do you see over the air and traditional cable continuing to be the big powers and the big revenue drivers?
I get asked that a lot. I think one of the things I usually say is it's a lot harder to kill off a media platform than you think.
Hmm.
People said for years, radios would kill newspapers. Well, they have to a certain extent, and TV would kill radio. Well, it has to a certain extent. Then cable was going to kill TV, and then the internet was going to kill everything. Streaming was going to kill everything.
Yeah.
It takes a lot longer for that stuff to happen than people think. I mean, there's still 60, I mean, there's 50 million people in the cable bundle, and there's another 10, 12 million of them on, YouTube TV or Fubo or the streaming type cable services. So that's 62 million people, and there's 110, 120 million TV households. So you got half the money in one place. So this one-stop shopping. And even with the broadcast networks, most people who watch games on broadcast consume it not over the air through the
Right.
antenna. They get it through the bundle, their bundle
Yes.
of some sorts. Whether it's DirecTV or Dish or cable or virtual MVPD, it doesn't matter. They're getting it through that source. And so I'm hesitant to say anything's going to take that down. Is it still it's a diminishing business? There's no doubt about it. And so there's going to be a need to kind of, as I call it, fish where the fish are. You're going to have some games on. You're going to have some games on broadcast TV. You're going to have some games streamed. And I mean, that's a perfect example of why. I mean, it's clear Fox and Warner Brothers and ESPN had that idea, and that's what Venue is all going to be about, right? And ESPN has ESPN Plus, and Paramount has Paramount Plus. Fox is really the only one without a streaming aspect, well, except for BTN Plus. So they're playing in it. They haven't gone. Fox hasn't gone full bore into it. So I don't know that anything's going to change significantly. We've got TV deals through the next 6, 7 years. You've got the NBA deal on TNT, or excuse me, Amazon Prime, NBC, and ESPN for 11 years, right? So that's the deal ends this year. So that now you're out to 2036 or 2037, actually. So certainly the folks at the NBA, who are one of the smartest operators out there, which is how they swirled away $77 billion from those three companies, think it's going to be a force. Or certainly their linear television is still going to exist. But yeah, there's going to be streaming, and more people will access through streaming, but it's not going to be the only way. So the other thing that when people ask me about big things, the gambling thing is going to be big. I think it's going to be interesting to watch the old Fox RSNs, which were Bally's and which were bankrupt and which are now FanDuel, and to
Yeah.
see how FanDuel integrates into those RSNs and what kind of things they can do once they have a robust streaming site and gambling becomes available in more and more places. I think that's a big thing. I think all these multicasts, I don't think that's going to end. I think that's going to uh, keep going. And I think we're going to see at some point a Sunday ticket type product for Saturdays.
Ooh, love it.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
I mean,
Sign me up. I'll make it a
yeah.
deposit.
The other thing that's quite interesting is all the multi-screen views. Fubo has it, YouTube TV has it, the Sunday Ticket piece has it. That's really a lot of people have taken to that. Either that or you have your own monitor wall at your house.
Right.
So those are the kind of the things I see. But there's probably somebody down in their mother's basement, some technical guy who's dreaming up something right now that we can't even imagine. And that could come fast, or all this artificial intelligence stuff. It's going to hit the broadcasting business. There's just no way it can't because of the technical aspect that's involved. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well.
All right. Well, Steve took us pretty globally there, or at least nationally there. I'm going to bring us back down to an FCS level. We have a lot of commenters that follow FCS, especially with the Mountain West. Obviously the Dakotas and the Montanas get a lot of love. We've been giving Tarleton State a lot of love because it's hitting some of what we would like to see with the Mountain West in terms of Central Time Zone, Texas, the recruiting, all that kind of jazz. I would like to know, maybe from your side, do the media partners get involved at all with the conferences when they're looking to possibly pull an FCS or invite an FCS program up to be FBS? I mean, we see a lot of that. Specifically in Conference USA, that seems to be a lot of what's going on there. But there has been some murmurings here with the Mountain West that they may be looking at the FCS side. Are there any concerns from a media side of things, or from a media partner with that? Or are they just looking at, hey, a member's a member, and the conference can deal with the membership side, and if there's a cost to that? How does the media partners do they get involved in that in any way?
Well, wouldn't necessarily be politicking for a FCS school because they mostly are smaller markets.
Yeah.
And TV folks, markets probably aren't as quite important as they used to be because all the good ones are taken. But as a TV person, it's ingrained in your head. It's market size. With college football, I think, in college football in general has taken a slightly different tact. And again, I think it's because a lot of the major markets are all chewed up, and that is, it's what's your alumni base? What are your rivalries? What's your commitment to facilities? Excuse me. What's your donor base? What's your history? What's your student body? All those things. What's your social media appearances? Things like that. All these things now that, I guess to a certain extent we use to justify in our minds that, yeah, that makes sense. They should come up. But I don't know necessarily that the FBS schools are all that thrilled about having a bunch of new FCS schools in. That's why they jack the initiation fees up so much, because what that becomes is it's another mouth to feed at the CFP table.
Yeah.
And that's going to be taking money out of somebody else's mouth, and they don't like that. And so, I mean, I guess I could see if somebody really wanted to pay the bill and to go ahead and jump up the level, and maybe they agree, I'm not eligible for a CFP payment for some period of time unless they make the CFP playoffs, which I could see. There's some interesting, the Dakotas has always been kind of interesting to me because of the consistently good product that's come out of there over the years. And so I can see it. I don't know that anybody at the networks are going to be jumping up and down on any conference table to add them, but it's an interesting thought. It's not the, I could see there are certain schools that are more appealing to me in the FCS world than the FBS world. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. All right. I can understand that that comment for sure. So, Bob, hey, we thank you so much for spending so much time with us, going over the Mountain West, the Big Ten Network, everything that we had here. Really appreciate you coming on the Big Mountain.
Enjoyed it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, we thank Bob again for coming on the Big Mountain, answering some of our questions. It was a joy to have our discussion with him. Again, if you like what we do here on the Big Mountain, make sure you give this one a like and subscribe to our channel. We do everything Mountain West, everything Big Ten. We pick games, we do realignment news, all things college football, pretty much the entire year. Oh,
you were on a roll.
I was on a roll. I'll just say, I'm going to start right with all things college football. All things college football the entire year. So join us here on the Big Mountain. Become a mountain dweller. With that, we thank you guys for watching. We'll see you all next time on the Big Mountain.